Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is the Google Pixel XL. It's a 5.5-inch smartphone with a Qualcomm Snapdragon 821 processor, 4GB of RAM, 32GB of storage, or 128GB depending on the model that you get. It's one of the first in Google's new Pixel line of smartphones, which replaces in some ways the Nexus phones of yesteryear. So whereas Google in the past had worked with companies like LG on the Nexus 5X and the Nexus 5, and you see the LG name right there on the back of the phone, this one just has a G for Google. This particular phone was made by HTC, but it's really designed to showcase the latest Google software and Google design ideas, although it does have some elements that make it look a little bit like, say, an HTC 10 smartphone crossed with an iPhone. A lot of people have said that the front looks a lot like an iPhone. There are some similarities to the Nexus lines from the past. So for instance, you can see on the back here that we've got the Nexus imprint fingerprint sensor, which I really liked on last year's phones, and I really like on this year's phone too. The camera setup is a little bit different, but the software is very similar. And of course, it's one of the first phones to ship with the latest version of Android, and it's going to get all the latest features. So let's take a look first at the hardware, and then I'm going to show you a little bit about the software and what makes this phone special. So in the box, this particular model that Google sent me to review comes with a USB to USB-C adapter, a USB-A to USB-C cable, and a rapid charging cable with a USB-C to USB-C cable. The phone itself has volume and power buttons on the side. You can sort of see the antenna lines here. It's got an aluminum and glass back and Gorilla Glass on the front. On the bottom, there's a speaker and a USB Type-C connector. Unlike some phones that also use that as the headphone jack, there is a 3.5mm headphone jack on the top, and that takes a Nano-SIM card, and there's a little tool that you can use to open that up that also comes in the box. On the back, we've got that Nexus imprint fingerprint scanner, which works really nicely, and a 12.3 megapixel camera. On the front, there's an 8 megapixel camera, and the headset speaker. Hiding below there, there's also a little RGB LED light that you can use for notifications. I don't know if we'll get any notifications while I'm shooting this video, but if I do, I'll try to make a point of showing you what it looks like up there. So there are a couple ways you can turn this guy on. You can either press the power button and get to the lock screen, then pull it up, and then if you have a password that you have to enter or a swipe pattern, or you can just touch the back to turn it on using your fingerprint if you set up the fingerprint scanner. And so that's a faster way to sort of log into a lot of things, and it's what I wound up using to turn on the phone most of the time now. I was a big fan of the Nexus imprint on last year's phones. I like it just as much on this year's phones. Google did send me the Pixel XL for a review. This is the larger of the two phones that are available this year and the more expensive. It has the 5.5-inch screen instead of 5 inches, and it has a starting price of $769 instead of $649. Makes it a lot more expensive than the last few Nexus phones, but it is one of the better phones on the market in terms of hardware. And honestly, I'm kind of hopeful that in the future it gets discounted when, say, the next Pixel 2 or whatever comes out, because while $769 is a little bit more than I wanted to spend on a phone, which is why I bought last year's Nexus 5X, it is very much a very nice phone. So let's take a look at some of the software features that are exclusive to this phone. It's one of the first to ship with Android 7.1, but it also has a few features that even when Android 7.1 comes out for last year's phones won't be available. So for instance, it has this Pixel launcher. There's a couple of things that make that special. One is at the top, instead of having a Google search bar, you have sort of a Google icon and a Google weather widget. Also, the app drawer is something that instead of pressing a button down here, you have room for 5 different items in your dock, and you swipe up to get to your full list of applications. We have these circle folders for your different applications, and while I don't really love the sort of all circular design here, I do have to say it is a little bit easier to see what's in some of these apps. So for instance, if we look at media on my 2 devices here, you can see the 2 sort of icons showing you what's in the media folder on the Nexus 5X, whereas on the Pixel XL you can see 4 different icons, and then you can open them both up to see the rest of what's available. So that's a quick look at the Pixel launcher. Another feature that is very much an exclusive to the Pixel phones right now is Google's voice assistant software, which you can bring up either by long pressing. Hello.
Hi, Brad. How can I help?
Or by saying,
I hear you.
Yeah. Okay, Google. Set a reminder.
What's the reminder?
And so on. Now I have a separate video that shows a lot of what Google Assistant can do, even though it's probably just scratching the surface, but I don't want to get into that in this overview video. I just wanted to touch on some of the basic features of the phone. So check out that separate video. It's also available in the full review of the phone at liliputing.com. Another thing that definitely makes this phone special is the camera software. So let's see, let me take a picture of something here. So we've got video and still photos. You can sort of focus and change your light conditions. HDR auto, HDR on, HDR off, and it takes very quick pictures even with HDR enabled. And you can adjust your color temperatures. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that setting here. Let's go back to auto. Now under settings, you can also change your photo resolution, take burst photos, and enable or disable video stabilization. And so let's switch to video. And with video stabilization on, if you're, say, going for a walk, it does a pretty good job of holding things steady. Again, I've got a separate video that shows this in far more detail than we're going to see here, but generally I find that it works really, really nicely. It's not optical image stabilization, it uses software, but it does a pretty good job. You have an option of going 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second, and you can shoot at resolutions between 720p and 4K. I found that 1080p is the default and works pretty well with video stabilization on or off. So that's a quick look at the camera settings. Again, you can find pictures that I shot with the camera under all sorts of different settings, low light environments, bright sunny days, and you can find video showing the stabilization at liliputing.com. In terms of performance, with 4 GB of RAM and one of the fastest processors available for Android smartphones, I find that it works pretty well at multitasking and doing lots of other things. So let's take, let's see, let's open YouTube, play a video, and then do split screen, which is something that was introduced in Android 7.0.
It doesn't get particularly warm when it's on my lap or on a table. It does get a little bit noisy from time to time, so if you're using this in a quiet room, you might notice that. You might also notice that there's a couple of screws down here on the bottom. You can open up the case and get inside if you wanted to upgrade the storage.
So, you know, it's got enough oomph to do a little bit of multitasking there, and you can also play some games. So let's bring up a little smash hit here. I'm realizing I'm getting a little bit of glare from my lights. Sorry about that. I was looking at the screen, not at the camera. So gaming works pretty nicely. Let's pull up another one that I can do pretty quickly here. It. Anyways, so that works nicely, and let's do one that's a little bit more graphically intense. So you get the idea. Games work pretty nicely, and you can see that they stay pretty well in memory here as well. So no real complaints there in terms of performance. My only real complaint with the phone probably is that it does have that starting price of $769, and especially with Android 7.1, one of the nice new features is the ability to sort of have two separate system partitions, so it can download updates and install them much more quickly, and that's going to eat up a little bit more storage. So if you're used to using a phone with 32 gigabytes, you might want the version that has 128. There is no 64 option, and that's going to tack an extra $100 onto the price. So that means that the Google Pixel X with a 5-inch screen has a price of $649 or $749, and this Pixel XL is $720 or $769 or $869. Now, it offers great performance for that price, and it is available via financing if you want to pay monthly over 24 installments. You can also get it from Verizon, is the exclusive carrier in the United States. But really, there's not a lot of reasons to buy it from Verizon. You could just bring your own phone to Verizon if you want to use it with that network, and then you get the benefit of getting all your updates directly from Google, which should happen anyway, and you have an unlockable bootloader, which Verizon is not promising as of the time that I'm writing this or recording this video. It is bootloader unlockable if you get it from the Google Store, however. So it's a pretty great phone. It's not a cheap phone. And that is why, as I mentioned, I actually got this the same day that my Pixel XL review unit arrived. My Nexus 5X arrived. I've been using a Nexus 5 for about 3 years now, and the battery is just shot. The 5X is not significantly faster, but it does have a much better camera. It has better battery life, especially given that this one's 3 years old, and I really like that fingerprint sensor. The Pixel XL also gets stellar battery life. At least compared to these other phones. I'm not a professional phone reviewer. I do pay a lot of attention to phones, but I spend a lot more time with tablets and notebooks and other devices. So I haven't tested every phone in the market. I'm not going to give you a lot of comparisons between this phone and others in terms of battery life, and I'm also not really that interested in running benchmarks. What I will tell you is that it feels plenty fast, and that you should pretty easily be able to get through a full day's usage with this phone without necessarily having to stop and charge it, whereas my aging phone I really have to charge every couple of hours at this point. You can also always invest in a spare battery pack, which is something that I have been carrying around for this phone for a while. But yeah, no, I often, in testing it, have sort of left it unplugged starting in the morning. I've been playing games, I've been watching videos, I've been shooting a lot of pictures on it, doing more of that than I probably would during a normal day because I'm using it for review purposes, and it's been able to keep up with all of that. And overnight I've left it unplugged, and it goes down a little bit, maybe as much as 10% of your battery is going to get lost overnight. But it does support rapid charging, so if you use it with the charger that comes with it, you should be able to fully charge it in maybe an hour or so. In my experience, it's give or take, depending on whether you're using the phone and some other factors. So it's a pretty good phone. That's, as I mentioned, my main concern is that it's not a cheap phone, and personally I was looking for a cheaper phone. I would not say that it's not worth that price, because that is the price that you would pay for a brand new unlocked iPhone, Samsung Galaxy phone, HTC phone, or LG phone. Phones cost a lot of money these days, but there are cheaper options. So if you're interested in something else, you might want to look at the OnePlus 3 or the ZTE Axon 7. Those are phones that sell for around $400 or less and have some flagship level features that are pretty great phones. The main advantage to me of getting Nexus or Pixel phones, though, is that you are getting your software delivered directly from Google, and I think that's something that is pretty worthwhile. So personally, that's why I bought an older, slower phone instead of going for one of the new phones. Plus, I like smaller phones, so 5.2 inches was something I was a little bit more comfortable with. But if you are somebody who can deal with custom user interfaces, slower updates, then there are other phones that are cheaper. But overall, it's a pretty great phone, and that premium price does get you one other feature I just remembered is if you go into settings, there's a new 24/7 support offering, which is something that had not been available on previous phones. So again, you can find more details, more information, more photos, more sample videos, and other things at liliputing.com. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the phone's features and value proposition.